Lana, thank you so much for coming on for our month-long Women in STEM series. We really, really appreciate your time and looking very forward to the opportunity to chat with you today. Could you go into a little bit of background on who you are as the queen of game dev on Twitch?
Thank you so much for having me, first of all. And thank you for the giant compliment. That is very flattering. So a little bit about myself. I am an independent game developer. So I've been doing game development for the last, probably full-time for the last 7 years. And I've been doing it while I stream on Twitch. My background, as you've posted in the preview of this interview, is I studied physics, which I never thought it would lead to game development, but here we are. I do use physics sometimes, so it can be handy, and it's definitely handy from the problem-solving side of things. I've been working on an independent game for the last 5 years. It's a very complex game that takes a lot of work. I've been doing all of the programming and the 3D modeling, and recently shaders and all that kind of stuff, story writing. So it's been a big undertaking, but it's been a lot of fun. And the folks here have been along for the journey on Twitch, which has made it actually really fun, which probably wouldn't have not been so fun all by myself.
So how did you originally pick physics? And then how did you go from physics to game development?
Well, it was definitely not a straight line. I went into physics. Honestly, I went into physics just because I found it really interesting. I think physics is basically just a way that we describe the universe. It's kind of like, here's the things that we know for sure that we can test, that we can reproduce. It's kind of like, math is the language of how things work, and you can put it into problems that define systems. It's such an interesting topic to me. So I ended up going into it, honestly, not really with a goal in mind. I just thought it was interesting and figured I'd find something along the way to do as a job, but I didn't. I didn't find something I wanted to do. And a lot of the people that were going into different careers with physics, it wasn't really something that interested me, because I really like mixing both logic and creative stuff. And most of those job paths were just the logic side. So it wasn't really as exciting as I kind of wanted something I was going to be spending all my life doing. Kind of wanted to have both. I ended up going into graphic design, which led to front-end web development, which led to back-end web development, and then user experience. So it was kind of this combination of the logic and the creative side of the web, which was really cool. And I really liked both of those sides of it. But then eventually I wanted to dig into games, which I did as a hobby for a long time. So I quit my job as a user experience designer and just decided to go into game development for a little while, just to see what it was like, because there's so much to learn. I wasn't learning enough in my evenings, on my weekends. It just wasn't enough. So I thought I'd go take a break, try to give myself my own education this time. And I started to stream while I did it, because otherwise I would have been sitting in a room by myself for months on end. So it gave a little bit of a social side to it. And a little while into it, I guess I got approached by sponsors who wanted me to try out their products on stream. And that helped me pay the bills, which meant I could do it longer and longer. And I've just been keeping going and been working on different games since. It's been a lot of fun.
I have so many questions for you, Lana. So
sure.
With the physics side of things, what was it that made you have the jump from going from physics to the development side of things, like that web dev side? Like, was it like similar to like the puzzles that were connecting you towards it, or what drove you towards that side?
Well, as a kid, I always found computers really interesting. I think I'm just one of these people. I think a lot of people probably who watch both of us and yourselves as well have just like this curiosity that you just want to keep learning more about something. So I did that on my own with the internet and the web. And I was actually making games at a young age, and I was learning Photoshop to do some art for them. And a friend of mine, she told me that her company was hiring another designer. She's like, "You taught me everything I know about Photoshop. Like, come and apply. I'm sure that they'll want to hire you too." And I applied, and I was able to do all the things that they were looking for. And so I started working with her, and I was like, "Oh, I really gotta, learn some stuff here." So I had to really dig into that. I did actually end up going to England, and I studied web development there just to kind of get some formal training at a college. But to be honest, I feel like I say I'm self-taught because I feel like I didn't learn that much. I have credentials, I have certificates now, which was helpful to getting jobs. But I feel like it was at the time it was a lot easier to just teach yourself.
A bunch of it's like the hands-on learning, like you were saying. Like once you left the web dev side of things, too, the same with the game dev side of things, where just the practice making perfect for it. Did you ever, as a kid, take things apart?
Yes, I did. I was just talking about this recently. If something broke, some kind of electronic, or if we came across something and I was hoping it would work, it didn't work, like bought something used or whatever, I would take it apart, hoping I could just like figure out how to put it back together. But I just ended up with a bunch of broken apart things that ended up going in the garbage, unfortunately.
But that's really cool. It ties back to like, right. I mean, that's similar to like the coding and the physics background too, is just you're teasing stuff apart, figuring out how it works. Did you find the physics helpful, like that physics training in the web dev and game dev side of things at all?
It's funny. I didn't think that it was useful. After I finished and I ended up going a different route, I looked back and thought, oh, what a waste of so much work and effort and money. And it was like, I thought it was wasteful. But looking back now, I realized that whole course was really teaching me how to, and anyone else who takes this program, teaching you how to take a system and quantify it. So you can look at all the things that are all the inputs of the system, how things are connected to each other, and how to try to quantify these different things, which is actually a lot like programming. So it didn't directly translate, but I do think it really helped me with just that sort of practice and approach to problem solving.
Do you find that, so there's no regret to it then, right? Like you were saying that like there's the thought of like, well, it made the money and everything, but now you're like, all right, there's a clear connection of like benefited me on how it worked on the physics side of things.
Definitely. I feel like looking back now, it gave me a really good understanding of just how things are put together in the universe. And I think if I hadn't done it, I would have constantly been like, that understanding wouldn't have been there, and I would have always wanted to understand it better. And it's really hard, even now, I think, unfortunately, it's pretty hard to, like, when you go to university for these things, they teach you, it was mostly just math and then how to apply the math. And it's not very fun. It's not very, it's very rare for people to sit around and learn that stuff on their own. And it wasn't fun doing it. It was interesting a little bit, but it was hard. And I found that, like, had I not done that, I don't think I would have had as good of an understanding. There would have been this, like, distance between why certain things are a certain way. But if you look at it mathematically, you're like, oh, okay, so we can prove it this way, and we understand this thing in this way. So it's like, it's one of those things that I don't know if I would have ever been able to learn it on my own had I not gone. So I'm really glad that I got that foundation when I did.
Can I ask, because we've had a question from the chat, what kind of physics was it? Like, what is it, like nuclear physics, right? Like black hole physics? Is it like those problems where, monkeys climbing up a rope and you're trying to see if the monkey moves with the rope and the forces? Like what flavor of physics was it?
Well, I started in medical physics, and that was a very niche program. There was only 11 of us. And it's kind of, you learn the stuff that you would need to know to operate all of the machinery at hospitals and how that relates to the biology of things. So it was kind of, I had to study, organic chemistry. There was some biology. There was the different physics, like classic mechanics, modern physics. I love astronomy, so I took astronomy courses whenever I could. Basically, I overloaded myself, probably why it was so intense, but I got to touch on a lot of different things. So it was cool.
But it's really cool to see that there is a direct connection between helping patients and then the physics side of things, like those problem solving. That seems like a really, really cool line of work.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot of interesting things. Like the school I went to, whatever you decide to specialize in, the first year is you take, I think you have to take, or at least I took chemistry, biology, physics, certain maths, and then you can decide to specialize afterwards. And I liked all of them, so it was really hard to choose. So I was really happy that I got into this program where I could kind of do some biology and some physics and some chemistry too. But I ended up switching to just general physics because that was like actually a very streamlined path to becoming like I said, different jobs in hospitals. And it didn't speak to me. Like I don't know if I have the like emotional capacity to be working in a hospital. I really respect people who do, but I feel like it wouldn't have been fulfilling to me, and it probably would have been really hard on me. So I ended up finishing with the physics degree instead of continuing, because there's like internships and stuff. Would have been probably 5 years had I gone for the full medical physics program. But it was interesting to take those courses, and I could kind of veer away and wrap it up when I was ready to be done.
And that immediate application to the real world too. Because I feel like that's a common question that folks say, like, well, it's physics, how could that help? And it's like, here, keeps you alive. And you could just like delve right into the medical side of things. How did that lead you into web development? So you mentioned like the puzzle side of things, of like figuring out how things work. But why that web dev side?
I guess, like I said, I had curiosity in a lot of different things. Both like science was interesting to me, and then tech was also really interesting to me. Especially, I feel like I grew up at a time where the internet wasn't as prevalent as it is now. And when you're a kid and you have access to the internet and nobody really understands it yet, you're like, oh my God, like this is so powerful. This is so cool. I could, I think anybody on the internet at the time was like, this is going to replace everything. This is, and you could see that this was up and coming. And so when I started to see that you could like right click and inspect source and like see how websites work, I started to, I found places where I could take that code and put it in and try to like piece it apart and see like, what does this thing do? What does this tag do? Oh, I have to open a tag and close a tag. Oh, it won't work if I don't have the body tag. It won't work if I don't have a head tag. Oh, I have to put this in this, like, so it was like just trial and error. And I was so into it that I took the time to like work that out and started doing web development and just like JavaScript games that I would send to my friends on like ICQ. So that was like my fun time. And through university, I was like wanting to go back to, I had very little free time to do those things. So when a job came up and I was done my studying, I just took the job kind of like, oh, that sounds like fun. I'd love to get into like web stuff and design and development. And it was something that I found also really interesting. So I kept learning that and I got really into that for a while. And it was in games and web and science, they're all kind of like, they've all been really interesting. So I've always just kind of gone into stuff that will fulfill that curiosity and that allows me to learn things and try things with those different topics.
It was almost like going back to like being a kid, right? Of taking stuff apart, except now you're taking apart the next big thing, which is a website. So that's a really cool transition. So you were saying, I think first it was the back-end web dev and then the front-end web dev?
It was front-end first. So that's like just the way websites look. First, I was designing the websites, designing different things. And then I was like, I would always hand them over to someone else. And I was like, I want to do the next step. Why not? Like it was often, the studio I worked at had more designers than developers. So it was always a bottleneck. Designers had time to just sit around while we waited for the developers to do things. And I was like, I'm just sitting here waiting for the next client to come in. Why don't I try to do some of this front-end development so I can make it look the way I designed it? It's easier that way too. And once I learned that, before you know it, I got to another job and now it was a bottleneck with the back-end developer. And I said, well, here I am sitting around waiting for the backend developer. Why don't I try to learn that? So, they ended up giving me the projects instead of slowly over time as I got better, I took on more and more projects. And then I was doing, the design, front end and the back end, all of it.
What did you find like the most different from going through your training in your physics degree versus, the art side of things at very face value, one could argue is very different, right? But we here, like on the stream, always say like art's only the other side of the sciences. Like you almost being a good artist means that you can explain the science in a really accessible way. So did you find the physics background helpful on that front end developer side of things with like all the graphics and making everything look the way it should?
Yeah, that's an interesting way to look at it. Do you guys find that you guys do a lot of art with what you do?
With like accessibility to the sciences, like we found that when we were doing school visits or even we were doing visits to retirement homes, people would be like, if they saw a picture of a bug, it was gross. But if you saw a picture of a bug dressed as Iron Man or something, it was cool. And so it seems like that makes it much more accessible. And then in published papers, like a figure summary of like, here is how something works. Like, here is the circuit that we've built. It makes things easier to understand. So I feel like it's an important avenue.
Yeah, that's interesting. And there's so many tools now that can help explain science visually, which hopefully you guys are able to use when you're needing to do these kinds of things. Hopefully it's become easier for you guys to explain some of that stuff. And you're right. Because these concepts are often abstract and hard to explain. So having visual aids can really go a long way.
So were you almost cued into it because of that physics training as well? Like it sounds like with some of your friends, like you already knew Photoshop and you could just like teach people left, right. So you were just like already teasing apart a lot of how these things were working. So it was almost a more straightforward transition.
Yeah, I always did both. I always found both interesting. I find like art is it's so cool to have like the tools of science and tech to make art because you can have so much room for exploration and there's so many interesting things that you can do. Just to give an example, like recently on the game, we were working on shaders, which is like, if you guys have seen games that do really interesting, weird visual stuff, or even if you guys have seen like visuals to music performances that are doing kind of like weird, surreal stuff, those are usually done with shaders. And so I might need a shader for something that's more functional. But like now I'm like, this opens up the door to do all kinds of weird experimental art. So like the more tools you have, the more like kind of weird and fun things you can do artistically. It feels like they help to, for me at least, they help me to like, they bounce off each other in a really cool way.
One thing that we'd love to do is have a game jam on educational games. The same idea, kind of the concept that you were saying of how cool it'd be to like explain a concept through a game. And again, it's like tying the artwork back to something that's fundamental in biology, physics, chemistry, you name it. And that would be just really, really cool to be able to see. So you did the physics, did the artwork, and then you went to that second position where you were looking at and trying to figure out, okay, how exactly does the back end side of the work? How did you feel like all the experience up until that point got you prepared for back-end web dev? And for the party people, what does that even entail? Like, yes, you want to make the website work, but what like is actually behind that? Like, what's the nitty-gritty of it?
Sure. So those who are not familiar with web development, front-end development is basically what you see on a website. It's the way the website works. The way it's displayed on your screen. It uses HTML and CSS, which you might have heard before. And those define how the information shows up on your screen. The back-end side of web development is things like user information. There's lots of lists and database that keep track of things. If you think about any social media account, the back-end stores where your pictures, and that's tied to your username, and that's tied to your email, and then it's like all of these things. The inner workings of the website is all the back-end side of things. I'm sure people in chat probably want to add to that and explain it better, but hopefully that gives you the basic idea of the difference between them.
Is that hard visually to transition from? Because it almost seems like you're going a very visual based methodology of doing a task, like doing the artwork, and now it's almost like really, really conceptual. Like, all right, I need this to do this particular thing in the back end. And now you don't, at least for me, when we do coding in biology, you don't see anything. There's no GUI. There's no really easy interface for typing and coding. And then you just have to kind of break things to get them to work. Is that similar in that back end work?
I feel like the way I went into it actually helped a lot. And I think this is something that we're lacking in our education a lot of the time, not always. Sometimes it's done well, but like you get taught something and you don't really understand why you're learning it or what it's supposed to be used for. And you're just like, okay, I guess this thing means that thing. And you're like, I don't know. Okay, I'll just take your word for it. But learning it the way I did was like, I sat down with Photoshop and I'm like, I think that the title should go here, and then this information should go here, and the button should be there, and you click here and you do this and that. It's all described visually. It all is very clear. I think anybody can pretty much do that. If you could draw out a website or whatever. Everybody can come up with how a website should be laid out. Then the front end, I started doing front end next, and it's like, okay, well, now I need to write down in like website language, HTML, that information and start to position it using CSS. So it's very clear. I'm now positioning. I'm physically moving, or I'm like digitally moving it around into the way that I just described in the other program. So that also made sense. And then I was like, okay, I need to log in. How am I going to do that? I need to do this. It needs to be private. It needs to, and like the things that I needed was like, it like tied in so perfectly that the practical application made sense because I already knew sort of the purpose of it before I started doing it, rather than learning how to program and then applying it to something. I was like, I have a purpose. I need to do this. What's the language? What's the terms I use to do the things I need? Which I feel is a way easier way to learn concepts than the other way around. Maybe other people are different, but I think I actually went into it in a way that was very easy to digest. And it was over a period of years, so it wasn't too bad.
It almost feels like maybe naively that being able to have worked on the front end, you kind of already know what's going to look good. And you already kind of know like how you want it to look good. So that it gives you kind of a direction on the back end. Like, I feel like having that expertise makes it you can make a website that's also aesthetically appealing from the beginning versus like making it just functional and then having to give it to the front end dev to be like, here, now you fix it, you make it pretty. You already from the beginning, like you're kind of like the whole approach of how to make a beautiful website.
Yeah, actually, that's funny you say that, because user experience design is kind of like you said, it's like you have it looking good, you kind of understand how to make it look good, you kind of understand how to position things and make it like function, and then you understand the behind the scenes of it. User experience is like, okay, let's make sure before we do any of those things that the thing that the person is trying to do or the thing that they're wanting to do is at the forefront of these designs. We're not just going to make it look good because we like the way that looks. We're going to be like, okay, what are they trying to do? Let's make sure they understand how to do that. Let's make sure they can do it easily. And then we'll design the visuals. Then we'll do the front end and back end and so on. So it's like, it was this kind of almost like a psychological side of web development, which was fun to do as well.
I almost feel like you're the James Cameron of web development, right? Where there's like in James Cameron's movies, he's known that he's like, all right, if you're going to do this in terms of design, well, what's the function of it? And so you're always like, okay, I'm going to make it pretty, but it has to have a reason. It can't just be like I'm adding flourishes for the sake of it. And that seems like a really efficient and clever way of doing things. It's just so cool that you know both sides of it. So you're like, yeah, we got this. It's no problem. How did you then transition from being this expert on both sides of web dev and moving into then game development?
First of all, it's flattering that you compare me to James Cameron, but definitely one of the sayings in user experience is form follows function. So like it should look good after it's functional. And I feel like it's almost annoying that to be working in that mindset all the time, because now when I see things that I can tell were designed, even not digitally, I'm like, that was designed to look good, but it doesn't work very like it drives me nuts now. I'm like always thinking about that. And I try to keep that up with things that I do, especially in game development. The transition between user experience design and that kind of similar jobs with front end and back end into game dev was it was a big jump. It was a big jump because I had done game development in the past, but I only did it like here and there. And when I started going full time in game development, part of that was because I wanted to learn a game engine. And if anyone's watching, you guys are not familiar with game development, you might have heard of Unreal Engine, you might have heard of Unity or Godot. It's cool that people are learning about these, like even if they're not in game development now, they're like common knowledge, which is really cool. Those were always really intimidating to me. And when I went from web development to game development, I kind of thought that there would be more overlap when it comes to like the programming side of things, I guess. But it was like starting from scratch, and it was how do I put this? It's like I came from a field where I had a kind of a pretty good understanding of the different parts of it, and I went into a field where I was new to 3D modeling, I was new to C# and the type of programming that goes into game development. I was new to how graphics and things like that are done, which is not something that you really cover when you're in the web side of things. And all the stuff I learned in the web felt like I was like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to use that. But there is crossover the more you get into things. And if I was doing multiplayer, then that back-end knowledge would definitely be helpful. So all of these things do overlap, and there is similarities. And there's still like there's programming concepts like if and else and switch statements, loops, and these kinds of things. They still do transfer, but it was definitely it was a lot to learn at once. And I do recommend if anyone gets into game development, it'd probably be less jarring if you learn first an engine and programming or 3D art, and not both at the same time, because both of them are big topics to learn. And so your payoff is a lot slower. So it's like a lot of work before you start to feel like you know what you're doing. But if you do one at a time, you can I think it would be a little bit more digestible. And I think that's better if you guys are thinking of getting into this, if you're listening.
So what was the mini projects that you were doing before jumping into the full time? Like what about those smaller initiatives got you thinking like, this is what I want to do?
So one thing I did before I made the switch was I hosted a game jam where we made games for kids who were in the hospital. We worked with different hospitals, either they had disabilities or they were dealing with long-term illnesses, and they were just sitting around like not having a good time for a lot of the time. They're sitting around, there's not much they could do. And so we decided to reach out to the people who are working with them and ask them what kind of game would be like their dream. What would they like to be playing? What would be something that is basically they made requests, and then we matched people up people were like, oh, I'll do that one, I'll do this one, I'll do that one, and we all made games for the kids. And to see the joy and the like relief that games can bring was like a huge deal, and it made me want to do that more. I felt like it was way more rewarding than websites. You know what I mean? And I know it's not just kids. Anyone can take a game and it's like a break from hard times. It's a new perspective. It's a way you can learn things from it. It's great to do educational games. It's such a useful and powerful medium that it's something that like I wanted to try it. I had to at least try it. I wasn't even sure if I was going to do it full time or like long term, but I ended up sticking with it.
That is an incredible game jam idea of just like reaching out to the hospitals and be like, all right, kids, let's help. What do y'all want to play? What did you have a favorite game? Thinking back to that game jam, like, did you have one that really stuck out, or like, what did you make for that game jam?
I made a game where one girl requested a game where a girl was fighting off natural disasters, which it actually works out. I love survival games, so that was the one that no one had picked yet. So I picked that one, and I think she picked it because she was fighting off cancer, which is such a huge challenge, and she wanted to feel empowered by, the girl in the game is fighting off the floods or this or that. And so that was one example of the kind of things. But there was one, it was a brother and sister duo, and they actually wanted to be game developers when they grew up. So when we spoke with the guy who was running like I don't even know what exactly, like he was, how do I put this? It was almost like he would look after them when the parents weren't around so that they weren't left alone kind of thing. It was like a daycare at the hospital. And so he would look after them, and there was lots of kids there. But he said that they would already be like talking about making games and doing doodles. So when they got the opportunity, they like drew out the characters, they drew out the world, the environment, and they gave that to people, and they turned that into like a platformer. So when we handed that back to them, we didn't meet any of the kids for like, for all the different reasons. But the guy that corresponded between us and the kids, he was like, though, you guys made those kids like year. They were so happy to see their game brought to life. That one was really cool because I know that it was something that they would have, like, that was right up their alley, and it was cool to see it, have a good impact.
So I was going to ask this at the end, and we might go round to it, but I feel like it's a good point to ask. You said those are the two kids who were having these, like, they wanted to be game devs. So how does it feel, and what responsibility do you feel? Because it sounds like you are an inspiration to a lot of different people, right? And then especially for women in STEM or girls who want to get into the technology side of things and do game dev. So how do you go about navigating something like that? Because you are, right? You would inspired all those kids and brought stuff to life for them. Like, what does that mean to you of being, not just a woman in STEM, but an inspiration to women in STEM?
Oh my gosh. It's like, it means a ton when I hear that it's inspiring to people, because I know a lot of people like criticize things like, women in STEM, and they're like, it's not fair, women, this should be even and this and that, but it's not. Like, let's be honest, it's not even. And when I was growing up, I never saw women in games. I never had a role model. My role models were men, so it was still cool to see people making games, but I never even imagined being a game developer. And that's why it took so long, and I had to do this zigzag of a path. But, since I was 12, I was making games. If I had been shown that people can make games, that women can make it, anybody can make games, like, I probably would have started doing this way sooner, and I would have been so much further along in the things that I'm doing. So if people can watch my stream or see that other women are doing things, it's a space for anybody, then that means a lot to me, because it would have been very helpful to me, and I hope it helps people, like, even if they don't get into it like as a job, if people feel like they're welcomed in a space, or they feel like they can do it, like it's not outside of their grasp or their reach, and then they try it and they enjoy it, even if it's just for like a little while, if they can just enjoy that for a little while and they can try things out, then that's fantastic to me. It's always a shame when people feel like they're not welcomed in a space. That's for sure.
Thank you for being a role model to so many people, Lana. And I love that. I didn't know that story about the hospital and the video games. I think that's incredible. And it almost links you back to your physics, right? With the medical physics stuff. And now it's almost like, you didn't get to see the kids, but you got like the patient experience almost, right? Be like, I can make a difference in these patients' lives. Like, yes, I understand the tech side of things, so it hits me hard to know exactly what's going on with these kids. Let me make a difference in these games. And so how did you know, or maybe you didn't know, that it was time to make that jump into game development, like full time?
How did I know it was time to make it? Before I answer that, I also want to say that there's other really cool applications of games and physics in the medical space. One of the hospitals that we worked with, there was actually a department for it was a children's hospital, and there was a department that was like a games department, and they had really cool games that were actually designed to help the patients practice their physiotherapy, because they said it was so hard to get kids to do physiotherapy because, they're tired or they're sick, and the last thing they want to do is like stretch and this and that. So what they did is they designed different games. They even had like musical instruments or maracas or things that would help them move in ways that was fun, and it was actually like a little challenge. And they said that that had a really positive impact on like the treatment. Like they were actually healing from these games, which was like, again, such a powerful medium that I feel is so underutilized. Another thing that they did in the waiting room, they had a game where it was like a projector on the wall, and it was just running even if nobody was playing. But you could go and like stand on different squares that were colored. It was a colored carpet, and the squares were different colors. And you could even this was accessible to anybody. So you could even roll a wheelchair over, sit on a square for a bit, and that's like your move. And then you roll it over to the next square, and like so anybody could play, and it was just a way for people to just have a little bit of a better time in an otherwise really dire, like not a fun place. Like hospital's not fun. So the way that they're including fun into things that are otherwise like not good or fun, it's like it's so helpful. And I think that games can be used in so many more ways. We're just scratching the surface. I'm excited to see where games go.
And it's incredible that they got, like, again, that you brought their idea of games to life. Like, I can't imagine the fundamental difference in the level of how they're feeling in the hospital. Like you said, it's scary, you're sick, and now all of a sudden someone made my dream game. Like, that just seems like it's an incredible sense of relief too. And it's also cool that you mentioned like the accessibility of the games as well. Like, someone could be in a wheelchair and they could also take part in that big projector. Like, that's your move. And like, again, making it accessible to as many patients as you can. Like you said, it's scratching the surface. It's not just for kids too. Like, I know as we're getting older, like, yeah, when my parents said like, oh, when you grow up, no one's going to be playing games, but guess what? We're all still playing games from when we were younger. And now it's like, it's more of a thing that like people our age and older are going to be playing games, and presumably you can integrate the same thing to them too.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I know. It's true. I'm surprised we're not seeing more of it, to be honest, but I think that it's coming. I think that more and more people are accepting games, more and more people are making games, and it's only a matter of time before people start to apply the joy of games to things that might be like, not as fun or whatever. What was the question you asked? Something about moving into the
Yeah, it's like when you're making the transition, right? You're going from the games on the side, front and back end web dev, and now you're gonna go full time into game development. And you had mentioned that you jumped in both feet, that you needed to learn a game engine and 3D modeling and artwork. So how did you, I guess, know, because that seems terrifying, right, to have that jump? And then what game engine did you decide on, and how did you decide the game engine? And it seems like it's a very intimidating thing to have done. And so it's just, how did you end up being able to like, you know what, I got this. Let me do it.
Well, to know that I wanted to do game development full time actually did take a little bit of like soul searching, or like it took some digging, right? I was kind of feeling stuck. I thought that, like I said, I did really enjoy user experience. I enjoyed web development. It did fulfill the creative side, and it fulfilled the more logical side of things. Like I like both of those types of work. But I actually went in. I just tried a lot of different things. Just kind of to like just to see what is like making me feel passionate and what is not feeling that so much. And at the time it was a corporate job. It was not very creative anymore. It was at a point where I knew the steps to take. I saw the problem. I applied we do the research, and then we try this and we test it, so it was like, it wasn't as creative as it once was. And even the logic was almost like step by step. I had done it so many times and so used to it. So trying to think the things I'd done. Basically, anytime somebody was like, oh, it's life changing, I was like, oh, tell me more, tell me this. And so I tried different things. I did some game jams. I'd always found game development interesting as a hobby, but I'd also found other things interesting as a hobby. So I really wanted to dig and see like what is the I wanted to do. I felt like I was trying to do everything. So I thought, what is the thing I'm gonna be the most excited about? And the more I dug into it, the more I realized that game development was not only something I've been enjoying for a long time, something I've been wanting to do more for a long time, but it also kind of encompassed all the other things I wanted to do. I enjoyed writing, I enjoyed music, I enjoyed art, I enjoyed programming, and game development combines all of those things. So it was like I didn't really have to choose one of them. I could do all of them and package it into just one medium and just have like full creative expression and go in so many different directions within that medium. So that's the thing that appealed to me the most. As for how did I do it?
Yeah.
I saved up. I was saving my money for a long time. I let my workplace know, I think 3 months in advance, the project I was working on was coming to an end. So I sat down with my boss and told him he already knew I was like, I don't know. He was cool. He was like, he led meditation retreats and stuff. He's like, when I told him like, I want to go follow my passion and try doing game development. He's like, I know you're on a journey. Like I support you. He's like, it sucks. Like, I don't want you to, we need you here, but I understand. And I was lucky. I had a few different workplaces who had said like, if you ever want to come back, we want you to come back. So I felt like it wasn't actually that big of a leap, which was definitely helpful. I had some backup and I had a financial strategy. I wasn't just going in recklessly. I did have there was a method to my madness. And like I said, I kind of had a runway and I was only planning to go in for like a few months, but luckily I got some sponsors in and I was able to go longer and make it work. So I was able to keep doing it.
That's incredible. So yeah, it's not just like you're ready to jump at a moment's notice. It was very planned out and you knew you had the skills to be able to be successful. And I think what really resonates too is that you had the passion for it. This wasn't just a one-off thing you had been building up. Almost seems like from being a kid taking stuff apart to the end game of like, let's make games. How did you choose what game engine? And the reason I ask this is because that seems to be a common thread with folks who are maybe tangentially associated with game devs here on Twitch, that we always have our favorite streamers that do either, like you said, Unreal, Godot, Unity. How did you end up choosing what was the right game engine for you?
There was a few different things that I looked at. At the time, things were different. This was quite a while ago. One of the things that stood out to me was the monetization actually was something that was a factor because I knew that both of them at the time were very comparable. They've both gone in kind of different directions since. I don't think Godot was around at the time, so it was either Unity or Unreal. And I think at the time Unreal took a percentage where Unity you only pay if you pay like a fixed amount after you make a certain amount of money. Like it felt like a good business decision, honestly, because I knew that Steam was going to take a percentage. If I work with a publisher, they would take a percentage, and then the game engine was going to take a percentage. It felt like a little bit less. It felt like I was owning the game a little bit more if I worked with Unity. I also, as I mentioned, like I knew things like PHP and some other web stuff, but I didn't know C# and I didn't know C++, and those were the two languages I was choosing between. C# is way more accessible than C++, so that was kind of it was like going to be an easier learning curve to use Unity. And I think Unity also had, and I'm not sure what the Unreal situation is, but Unity has a lot of resources for learning. And I knew I was going to be self-teaching. And if I didn't have a lot of resources to learn, that was going to be, so much harder. But luckily there was, Brackeys was always around. Everyone knows Brackeys if they've used Unity. He's like the tutorialist from a while ago. All his videos are still really helpful. Unity had great resources on their website, so I was able to teach myself and watch tutorials, read documentation, trial and error, and it wasn't too bad to get started with Unity.
So you're getting started in the Unity game engine, you're 3D modeling stuff now. How did you go from that particular point in time to now making Strain? How many games in between are we talking? Or did you start off like, I'm going to make Strain? Like, what was the inspiration for it? How many games in between? Like, how did we get to the modern day Strain of LanaLux?
I did a mobile game first on Twitch. That was a big learning curve. That was when I actually tried doing, I don't remember. It's all kind of blurs together when I went full time on Twitch and what game I was working on and such. But when I started learning Unity, I did another game which is out on Steam called Don't Notice Me. It was a jam game, actually. The concept was you're basically sneaking around somebody's room, searching around, and it was kind of like an escape room game, but with a surprise, because then someone could jump in at any time. So it was this kind of like puzzle under pressure almost. And I built it out and I put it in front of some friends and asked their opinion on it, and they're like, it's cool, but like they're like, I just want more of it. It feels like, what's the story? Whose room am I in? Why am I doing, like, they wanted to know, like, I'm like, oh, it's because of this and that. They're like, tell me that, like, give me more of that. And the other feedback was the puzzles are like too samey, which makes it confusing. So they're like, it'd be cool if there was like a variety of different puzzles. So I figured out how to do, you got to find the combination on the lock. You have to match up the randomized stickers around the space, and that's the code to the other type of a thing. Or you got to get into a laptop, and you've got to. So I kind of mixed it all up a little bit. So it was, which obviously is required me to learn a lot more to do different types of programming. I ended up spending about 8 months on that game, and I published on Steam. And that was about a year of work on that game, and that was a really good first game to start with. The chat, I did it almost entirely on Twitch, and the chat like chimed in with fun and silly ideas all the way through. It was a lot of fun to work on with everybody, and so that one went out. I tried a couple other things that kind of eventually ended up going into Strain and feeding into Strain. And when COVID started, I felt like it would be fun to have a game about this apocalyptic version of a virus, like worst case scenario, what would the world look like, and how would you? Because I kept thinking, like, what would happen if like things went real bad and like I'm in the city, like people would get violent, like it'd be like so I'm like coming up with all these ideas. I'm like, I want to play that as a game, and it's also kind of cathartic because it's like I know it's not going to get that bad, and I can look at it as like fiction, and it's kind of like comforting in a weird way. I'm like very far away from this situation. So that's how it started, and it's become a totally different beast. I've learned so much along the way, and I've put it in front of people at many different forms, many different stages, and I've taken that feedback to heart. And I really have been trying to create the experience that I wanted from the beginning. And now that I have a better ability to do that because I have more skills and a better understanding of how things work, I'm putting it together now in a way that I think is going to finally give that kind of that feeling that I wanted to give at the beginning of the journey. It's been a lot of work, but I think it's finally getting there.
Is the artwork also how you would imagine this post-apocalyptic world inspired by COVID?
Sorry, can you ask that again?
Like the art style of the game, was it that post-COVID world vibe that inspired the art style of the game too, or is that harken back a little to that first game jam of when you decided maybe the art style?
The game jam was for the other game. This one was not part of a game jam, but it was more inspired by like I was living downtown in Toronto, and I would go for walks at night all the time. And I grew up in the country, so when I moved to the city after university, it was so enchanting to me. I used to I love walking down like a dangerous alleyway, which I probably shouldn't do because I'm like, ooh, like what's down there? Like, where's that lead? Where does this go? And I like to like just piece together all these weird I almost said levels. It's like feels like really crazy, intricate level design, and you know, you on a cold night you see smoke coming out of the sewers, and if it's a foggy night, you see like police lights lighting up the fog, or you see like weird and interesting characters walking down the street. So I thought, you know, in this apocalyptic situation, it's like I imagine those things, but like ramped up to this fantastical version and maybe even surreal version of what a city would be.
Definitely get that vibe from the trailer. I definitely get the vibe from the trailer. It looks like it's gonna be a blast to play, and I can't wait to get my hands on it. And
thank you.
It just, again, it's beautiful. And one thing that the chat has been chiming in on too is how incredible it is when you do the artwork for it. When you're doing the 3D modeling of it, you make it look so easy. You're just kind of like even today, you're like adjusting the different things and sculpting and getting stuff ready to go. And it's just like, he's just like going. And it's just how, when you're building these worlds, what do you see? Like, do you see, again, back to the functionality of things? Like, why am I building it this way? What function is going to serve in the game? Or how are you taking in these visual inputs of the code and making it into something real in the game. I imagine similar to like the back end to the front end coding that you did, maybe in terms of how to think about it.
Yeah, I mean, making a game is like some of those principles from user experience design. It's like that times a million because there's so much function that needs to work, and then it all kind of has to tie in. It's like, you know, the progression of the game has to work a certain way, the story has to work a certain way, and they have to go back and forth. It's like it's a very complex puzzle because you can't give somebody an axe to chop down like something wooden if you don't want them to enter the area where the wooden thing can be chopped down. You know what I mean? Like all of this logic has to actually make sense to some extent. So it's hard to like move it all around, and the writing and the planning of these systems and the integration of them it's probably the biggest part. And it's like I do that kind of thing in the evenings when I'm just, you know, sitting and typing things out and thinking of it. But it's definitely a huge part of the game. I forget if I even answered the question.
No, you definitely got it. It's all like built out in front of you. It's a lot of visualization. It's a lot of planning out. I like the explanation too. Like, all right, if I'm giving you an axe, what are you going to use it for? Are we just going to have it for the sake of having it, or is it going to go chop the wood in that room? And it's a very logical process, and it's not just here, let me build this thing because I can. And I really, again, you're the James Cameron of game dev. That's how we're going to call this, right?
So, I don't know if I deserve that title. But I mean, I'll take it. Why not? I'll take it.
Yeah, see? Exactly. Chat, please back me up on this. So what's next on the horizon then for you, for Strain? Like, what is the next big step in the Lana Odyssey?
Right now, Strain is just the only thing on my mind. I've done game jams and stuff along the way, and I like to do game jams here and there. They're like a weekend little recess. But other than something like that, I've learned to not do. If I've got one big project on, anything else has to have like a very short timeline and a very hard cutoff because it's so difficult to try to juggle more than one thing. I mean, I'm already juggling streaming and game development. I don't need any other project. The game itself is already so much. So Strain is my ultimate focus. Just getting from one milestone to the next is all that's on my agenda right now.
As from Chad, as an individual creator, how do you deal with your self-imposed scope creep?
How do I deal with self-imposed scope creep?
Yeah, because like you're the one who's directing everything, right? You're the self-host. Like, how do you know? Like, I guess, you know, this is the cutoff point for this particular line of things. What am I thinking of for this zone of things? Like, how do you manage? Because it's all you, right? How do you end up managing that?
I think maybe I work differently than a traditional studio because traditional studios have a budget and they have people. You know, they also work 9 to 5. And so when they set a timeline for something, what they tend to do is, you know, there's a crunch time, and people will work the evenings as well in order to get that goal met. I already work all of my hours, so I can't just crunch. I've tried setting timelines for myself, but like, what do I do if I don't meet them? It's like the thing is not done. I can't move on to the next thing if it's not done. I can't just have a game with a broken system, and I can't work any more hours than I'm already working. So I've learned that, you know, this is just the process that I'm in, and I'm trying to make a really good game, and I'm trying to make it as soon as I can, and that does take time. And I'm learning so I'm learning so hard how much it really does take to make a game, especially when you're doing all of the pieces of it. But you know what? That's the process, and hopefully it will end up with a game that's really cool because it was made like that. I didn't take shortcuts. I didn't sacrifice things. I didn't end the work on something because time was up or budget was up. I'm putting in the effort to make sure everything is done really well, and I hope that really shines through in the game.
As we're wrapping up, Lana, this is something that I asked Tofu as well the other night. What does it mean to you to be a woman in STEM as we're celebrating Women's History Month?
What does it mean to me to be a woman in STEM? I mean, again, these conversations come up a lot, and I think it's important to say that celebrating women in STEM is not to create division. It's to support each other. Men and women have differences. Everybody is different. We should be celebrating those things. And when there's people who are not, you know, it's not as common to see those people in a space, it's great to help support them and invite them into a space. And what you're doing here with the other women in STEM is so cool because honestly, I think it's helping other women find each other where they might feel alone or they might feel unwelcomed in a space. This is a chance for people to connect with each other and feel like there's others who are doing what they're doing and people aren't alone. And I love when people can feel like they're part of communities. So I really thank you for hosting this. And thanks for inviting me to be on. It's great to be on here.
Thank you for coming on, Lana. And I think with that, we did ask Lana for an hour and we've already gone over a little bit. I want to be respectful of your time. Is there any last message that you would like to plug? We're going to play the trailer for Strain after we sign off and push everyone towards wish listing. But is there anything that you'd like to wrap the conversation with?
I just want to encourage people I guess I would encourage people to like follow your passions. You guys heard a little bit about my background from this chat, and as you guys probably figured out, it took me a lot of figuring out and a lot of trial and error and a lot of putting off things that I enjoy. But if you guys can find a way to do something that you really love, especially if you can find a way to do it in a sense that it helps others in some way or another, like try to figure that out, because that might just be that missing piece that actually makes your life like really, really fulfilling. And I think it's easy to be discouraged on that, but I want to re-encourage you to like go after that and like really push for something that that you can do well, that you can enjoy, and that can help others.
That is absolutely beautiful. And especially given your story, going from the kid taking apart things that they couldn't be put back together to now making your own game, to the physics, to the front end, back end web dev, to jumping in on a game engine. Lana, thank you so much for sharing your story with us today.
Thank you again so much for hosting and for inviting me to be here today.
Thank you. We'll see you next time, guys. Everyone, please go follow the lovely LanaLux and Wishlist Strain. Thank you again, Lana.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.